Oh, if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, I invite you to do so and also activate notifications as we constantly upload new videos every week. The Beast, a story adopted from local legends of the Huasteca Potosina, written and adapted by Eduardo Lignan. Remember that you can read more stories from this author by visiting the Facebook page I will leave in the description of the video. The work in the harvest is quite hard, but it is the only thing many people in various places in the Huasteca can do, as its humid climate makes this type of cultivation quite common. However, the conditions of slavery under which the workers perform this labor are concerning. This particular story takes place on a sugarcane field in San Luis Potosí, located in the Sierra de la Huta municipality of Ciudad Valles. Remigio Valderas is the youngest child of a family of laborers. They migrate during harvest seasons to different plantations of cane, coffee, or orange. It was the first year Remigio was going to work in the cane, just like his grandfather, father, and brothers had done. He had just finished primary school and was 13 years old enough to work and start helping the family. But this November morning, he woke up with no desire to do so. He had breakfast with his family, a plate of beans with tortillas, and went out with his brothers to a community square in their small town. That afternoon, the foreman was expected to arrive. He wanted to continue studying, but his relatives refused to give him more support. Either he worked or left the house. So he went to stand with a group of men hoping for the foreman to arrive. As evening fell, a van arrived along with several very old school buses. From the van came a man with a hat and dark glasses who went to the group of men waiting, who were hoping he was the foreman. He then made a deal and specified the working conditions. Some were excited about earning money, while others already knew it wouldn't happen and that they wouldn't get anything of what was promised. But it was the only option to earn something, so many agreed to go. Remigio reluctantly packed his things and followed his brothers, who got on one bus while he boarded another. What he didn't know was that the vehicles would take different routes to different camps. It would be in the early morning when the truck arrived at the camp. Slowly, all the men and boys began to disembark and formed a line while waiting for the foreman and the boss. Remigio felt anxious as seeing only without his brothers. He wanted to get back on the truck and leave, but logically they wouldn't let him. The fear and unease of the young man grew as the foreman talked about daily quantities of cane and the payment they would receive for the 12-hour grueling shifts starting from 7 in the morning. Also, food would have a cost, as well as accommodation, which would be deducted from their weekly wages. After this, they said their goodbyes, and the men hurried towards the boilers. Remigio, not understanding why, sadly discovered that they were rushing to get a cot, a blanket, quickly filled with ticks. The weak and the elderly opted to stay in a clearing, using sacks and sticks as a makeshift roof to protect them from the dew, but with such bad luck that the nightly rains came and flooded the fields. Many stayed in a shed near the only latrine available for all the men, so they had to endure stench and mosquitoes. Remigio had the worst luck. Due to his ignorance, cursing his fate, he settled for some trash bags and a sack of Ixtil to cover himself from the cold. Everyone woke up at 5 in the morning, the time to bathe with cold water and have breakfast in the communal dining area, where they would have a toll and a piece of bread that surely cost them a lot. Remigio had spent a rough night, so he got up heavily and very late. By the time he arrived at the dining area, there were only pieces of bread and cold atoll left. After eating, all the men got on the truck that took them to the sugarcane field for the harvest. Each day they had to meet certain quotas, and for the young man, not knowing how to use the machete, it was a hellish experience. His hands, worn out, begged him to give up. By the end of the day, he hadn't covered even a quarter of his quota, and the next day, he had to do twice as much if he wanted to earn a decent wage and continue eating. He was on the edge of despair and, for the first time, asked God for strength to keep going. Over time, he learned how to chop the cane, gather it, and burn it to load onto the truck that would eventually take it to the mill. He made good friends who taught him many things that helped him perform the job better, but he never fully adjusted. During that time, the rains fell almost every day, making the harvesting work difficult, and at night, the thunder and lightning that illuminated the camp were overwhelming and disturbing. At that time, another crew of workers arrived from San Vicente Tanquayalap. Among them was a peculiar elderly man with an indigenous appearance who immediately caught everyone's attention in the camp. He spoke very little Spanish, but made himself understood very well. Additionally, almost everyone there spoke the dialect. Despite being very old, the strange elderly man had remarkable vigor and strength. He hardly spoke and would make bonfires with herbs at night, seemingly performing rituals while crossing the fire from one side to the other. As a result, the men began to call him Old Wizard, and that's what he did. He protected himself from the supernatural things in the Sierra de los Montes, which he knew very well. This made everyone laugh, but they respected him because he was very good at working with Cain. The old man became very friendly with Remigio, even giving him advice about women and telling him explicit stories about his adventures with women during his youth. The young man respected him and found in him a fatherly figure with whom he could talk about his problems. One night during some festivities, the camp owners threw a big party for the workers to celebrate the birth of the new heir to the lands. That's why there was a lot of food and drink. In addition, they brought prostitutes from neighboring towns for the men's pleasure. Since there were a few women and many men, they set up 6 cubicles where the women would wait naked. 5 minutes was the maximum time, and while one man exited, another entered to satisfy his desire. The old man urged Remigio to have sex with one of these women, but the young man refused due to the disgust he felt. Both the old man and the others laughed at him and began drinking. As night fell, they started to talk about stories from the region. The old man, in a serious tone, told them about a beast that roamed the Sierra de la Wuta. It was said to be part man and part animal, and for a time it only attacked several villages in the region, killing livestock and farm animals. The real problem began when it tasted human flesh. It liked the taste so much that it started killing people and dismembering them to satisfy its hunger. During the full moon, people said it was the spirit of a cannibal witch turned into a beast. However, those who knew more about the creature said it was much more, something evil that affected people during the longer nights. Those who had seen it during attacks in their communities described it as a humanoid animal with long horns protruding from its head, sharp claws, and unimaginable violence towards people. It left a stench of wet dog and rancid excrement in the air that caused nausea and headaches. The beast had black skin covered in hair and eyes that were both fiery and violent. If you were unfortunate enough to encounter it during rainy nights or days, it was certain you would be dismembered and devoured by the infernal creature. Everyone listened attentively to the old man's tale. Some seemed skeptical, but others had heard similar stories from the mountains. Remigio felt fearful and imagined what it would be like to encounter such a beast in the Sierra during the night. Thus, the night passed with stories and drinks, and everyone fell asleep. The next morning, a heavy rain fell over the entire camp. Even so, they had to go out to work, fearing lightning strikes from using machetes and hoes to cut the cane. Fortunately, everything proceeded calmly, and by 7 in the evening it was completely dark. The rain intensified, and everyone quickly ran to the truck to return to the barracks. However, they had the misfortune that the vehicle got stuck in the mud and a small stream formed by the water flow. They all got out, trying to free the stuck vehicle, but they were unsuccessful. The lightning and thunder made their task even more difficult. Additionally, since the rain was endless, they needed to place some tires to move forward and get out of the ditch. One of the foremen suggested placing some wooden planks under the tires, and for that, someone would have to return to the harvest site where there was a shed storing tools. The problem was that no one wanted to go, and in the end it was left to chance, and Remigio was assigned to get the wooden planks. Seeing the young man's frightened face, the old man offered to accompany him. Without thinking, they both ran across the field through the sticky mud created by the torrential rain. Time passed, and they did not return. Meanwhile, the men made great efforts to free the truck by pushing it, and when they finally succeeded, the young man and the old man had still not returned. No one wanted to wait for them because it was very cold and they were hungry, and it was already very late, so they decided to leave and leave them to their fate. They could either stay in the shed or walk a few kilometers to the barracks. Laughing heartily at their misfortune, everyone happily boarded the truck and headed towards the comfort of their beds and hot food. The next morning, everyone returned to the field, even laughing because they thought they would find the old man and the young man huddled together in the tool shed. But when they arrived and checked the place, they found it locked and there were no signs of anyone. This seemed very strange to them, and they began to worry, imagining that perhaps they had gotten lost or were injured somewhere. However, on their way to the location, they did not encounter anyone. They started a search, which proved fruitless because there were no signs or traces of either of them. They thought maybe they had crossed paths without being seen, or that they had returned on foot. They continued with their daily work. Around midday, one of the laborers screamed in horror, and the others alerted. They thought he might have come across a snake or the abundant spiders in that area, but seeing the man's distressed state and his pointing towards the sugarcane field, they investigated the source of his horror. When they pushed aside the tall cane, some men screamed upon seeing the remains of a person in the middle of the field. It was a mass of mutilated flesh. What had once been a human being was now a heap of flesh, intestines, and bones. The torso had been opened, and all the organs had been removed and chewed. Parts of the brain and the skull, without skin, were grotesquely arranged on the grass, seemingly mocking everyone with their empty eye sockets and bloodied teeth. The arms and legs were missing. Instead, there were excrement and hairs of some kind of animal all over the site. This caused some to vomit, and others, without fear, said it had been the beast the old man had told them about. After the authorities arrived to collect what remained of the person, they determined by the clothes and some belongings that it was Remigio who had been dismembered. Everyone thought the murderer was the old witch who had turned into the beast and killed the young man. However, this theory fell apart when they found the old man's corpse. He was impaled on a tree, and animals had devoured his legs until only bones remained. His face bore an expression of horror that many could not shake off for a long time. No one knew what had happened to him, but investigations revealed that he had been trying to flee from something, and perhaps due to the darkness and the rain, had gotten stuck in the tree while trying to climb it. They could not determine what he was fleeing from. Everyone felt fear, and many began to leave the camp. Those who stayed did not take long to leave. In 100 days, the camp was deserted for that reason. Even the owners hired hunters and shamans to find, or at least confirm, that something was being done. But paranoia spread to neighboring towns, and people stayed indoors early and did not venture out during the rains. It is said that the beast roams the sugarcane fields during the harvest season, and according to legend, when you hear growls and see the spirits of dead laborers in certain parts of the field, it is a warning that you should not continue down that path or risk being devoured.